A horse marked by abandonment crosses paths with a simple man, and together they awaken something so powerful that not even the silence of the countryside can hide it. In the heart of Kentucky's countryside, amid the verdant fields of rolling hills, stood the impressive Sullivan Stables. The property gleamed under the afternoon sun like a perfect postcard, impeccably painted white fences, noble wooden stables, and pastures that looked like freshly cut green carpets. Robert Sullivan, owner and pride of the local elite, walked among his animals with the proud posture of someone who had achieved everything through his own effort and determination. "Mr. Sullivan, Midnight is restless today," commented Jack, the oldest handler, adjusting his straw hat while observing the magnificent black horse that moved nervously in the riding ring. Robert furrowed his brows, studying the animal that had become his greatest source of pride and secretly of concern. Midnight wasn't just an award-winning horse. He was a connection to a past that Robert preferred to keep buried, a link to decisions he had made many years ago that now weighed on his conscience. "He's always been temperamental," Robert responded, but his tone revealed more than he wanted to admit. "Keep him in the main stable tonight. There's a storm approaching." The handler nodded, but couldn't help noticing the distant look of his boss. There was something about Midnight that affected Robert in a way no one could understand. The horse seemed to carry memories that haunted the man who had become one of the most respected breeders in the region. As the afternoon progressed, dark clouds accumulated on the horizon like an omen. Robert locked himself in his office, where a series of old photographs decorated the walls, images from his youth, from times when life was simpler and dreams had not yet transformed into heavy responsibilities. Among these photographs, one stood out, a young Robert next to another man, both smiling beside a black horse identical to Midnight. The resemblance was disturbing, almost impossible. Robert touched the frame with trembling fingers, recalling words that echoed in his mind. "Promise me you'll take care of him as if he were your own son." The storm arrived with tremendous force. Wind gusts howled through the trees, lightning illuminated the sky like silver blades, and rain punished the ground with brutal intensity. In the main stable, Midnight moved with growing agitation, as if he could sense something beyond the natural storm that was battering the property. Jack checked the gate latches one last time before taking shelter, but the wind was stronger than any forecast could have anticipated. A particularly violent gust caused one of the gates, already aged by time, to give way with a crash that was lost in the roar of the storm. Midnight didn't hesitate. As if he had waited for this moment his entire life, he crossed through the opening with determined steps without looking back. The rain washed his black coat as he galloped through the darkness, guided by an ancestral instinct that spoke louder than any training or confinement. Freedom had a bittersweet taste. It mingled with the mud on the ground and the cold dawn wind, but for the first time in years, Midnight felt he was following his true destiny. The following morning, when Jack discovered the broken gate and the empty stable, he immediately ran to inform Robert. The man received the news in silence, but his expression revealed a complex mixture of despair and something that almost seemed like relief. "Sir, shall we organize search parties?" asked Jack, concerned about his boss's strange reaction. Robert remained silent for long minutes, observing the landscape devastated by the storm. His mind traveled to a distant past, to promises made and secrets kept. Midnight wasn't just a horse. He was the key to a truth that he had tried to forget, but which now surfaced like an emotional storm, as intense as the one that had devastated his property the previous night. "Yes," he finally said, his voice carrying a determination that surprised even himself. "But this won't be an ordinary search. Jack, there are things about this horse that you don't know, things that perhaps it's time to reveal." Meanwhile, miles away, Midnight walked along rural roads toward a destination that even he didn't know, but which his heart seemed to recognize with each step. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. On the other side of town, where rural properties mingled with small family farms, Leon Baker started another day of work, even before the sun had fully risen. His calloused hands adjusted tools in the shed of his improvised workshop, where he repaired tractors and agricultural equipment for neighbors in the region. A widower for 5 years, Leon had found in daily routine and honest work a way to keep the longing for Mary under control. The small but well-maintained farm reflected his personality: simple, organized and welcoming. His dairy cows grazed peacefully while Tony, his faithful helper, checked the damage that the previous night's storm had caused. "Mr. Baker, you need to see this," shouted Tony from the other side of the pasture, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and concern. Leon dropped his wrench and walked toward the sound of the voice, curious about what could have caught his helper's attention so much. As he approached the marsh at the back of the property, he noticed hoof marks in the mud still fresh from the rain. "Look at the size of these tracks, Mr. Baker," commented Tony, pointing to the deep marks in the soil. "They're not from a cow or an ordinary horse. This animal must be huge." Following the trail with the natural curiosity of someone who had spent his entire life dealing with animals, Leon walked through the damp vegetation until he spotted a dark figure huddled near the abandoned shed that stood at the boundary of his property. Midnight was there, exhausted, with superficial wounds on his legs and his body covered in mud and dry branches. What impressed Leon most, however, wasn't the majestic bearing of the animal, but something in his eyes. There was an intelligence there, a deep sadness that touched the farmer's heart in an inexplicable way. It was as if the horse carried an untold story, a past that weighed on his shoulders as heavily as the rain that still dripped from his mane. "Easy, boy," murmured Leon, approaching slowly with his hands extended. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." Midnight raised his head, studying the man who approached. There was something different about this place, an energy that completely contrasted with the coldness of the stables from which he had fled. Leon didn't emanate authority or imposition, just a genuine kindness that the horse hadn't experienced in a long time. "Tony, go get some old blankets and some feed," Leon requested, without taking his eyes off the animal. "This boy is injured and hungry." As they tended to the superficial wounds and offered food and fresh water, Leon noticed details that intrigued him. Midnight's coat, even dirty and wet, revealed expensive and refined care. His posture, even injured, maintained a natural elegance that wasn't common in working horses. And there was something more, a tooled leather saddle, wet but still attached, to the animal. "This horse isn't from around here," observed Tony, examining the well-cared-for hooves. "Look at these horseshoes, Mr. Baker. This is professional farrier work. Not just anyone could do this." Leon agreed, but his attention was captured by something more intriguing. Midnight reacted in a peculiar way to the sounds from the workshop. Whenever he started one of the older tractors, the horse would approach and move his head rhythmically, as if recognizing something familiar in that specific noise. "Could he have been trained for heavy work?" asked Tony, observing the strange behavior. "I don't know, but there's something special about this animal," replied Leon, stroking Midnight's neck. "Look in his eyes, Tony. This horse has a story to tell." During the following days, as Midnight recovered, Leon began to observe his habits with growing fascination. The horse demonstrated exceptional intelligence, quickly learning the farm's routine and creating a special connection with the mechanical equipment. Even more intriguing was his reaction to certain specific sounds. Engines from older tractor models seemed to awaken in him a controlled agitation. It was Tony who made the discovery that would change everything. While cleaning the saddle, soaked by the rain, he noticed reinforced stitching with thread different from the rest of the leatherwork. He called Leon, who carefully examined the piece. "This isn't normal," murmured Leon, feeling the strange area. "It seems like something is hidden inside." Carefully, they opened the stitching and found a small object wrapped in waterproof material. It was an electronic device the size of a flash drive, with a small light that blinked intermittently. The two men looked at each other, realizing that this horse carried with him much more than they had imagined. What had begun as a gesture of compassion was rapidly transforming into a mystery that neither was prepared to face. "Mr. Baker," said Tony, his voice low and concerned, "I think this horse didn't escape by accident. Someone put this here for a very specific reason. The discovery of the electronic device left Leon and Tony in a dilemma. Neither had enough technical knowledge to understand what it was, but both intuited that it was too important to ignore. During the night, they talked at length about what to do, and by morning, Leon had made a decision. "I'm going to call Camilla," he announced, while having his morning coffee. "If anyone can help us understand this, it's her." Camilla Davis was known in the EAM region as a specialist in agricultural technology. With a degree in electronic engineering, she had returned to the countryside after working for several years in the city, bringing with her modern knowledge that contrasted with her genuine simplicity. She provided automation services to farms and had become a reference when it came to rural technological equipment. When she received Leon's call, Camilla was intrigued. She knew the farmer by reputation, an upright and hard-working man who would never get involved in anything dubious. Scientific curiosity spoke louder, and she promised to show up at the farm that very afternoon. "So you found this hidden in the saddle of a horse?" asked Camilla, carefully examining the device under a magnifying glass. Her eyes shone with the technical interest of someone encountering something out of the ordinary. "Exactly," confirmed Leon. "And the animal has some strange behaviors, gets agitated with certain types of engines." Camilla connected the device to her portable laptop, observing the information that appeared on the screen. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she executed different types of analysis. Her concentration was so intense that she forgot she wasn't alone. "This is very sophisticated," she murmured, furrowing her brow. "It's not a common tracker. It has heavy encryption, multiple layers of protection. Whoever made this had resources and advanced knowledge. But what does it mean?" asked Tony anxiously. "I still don't know for sure, but I can say that this device is programmed to respond to specific stimuli," explained Camilla, pointing to graphs forming on the screen. "Look here. It has sound sensors, movement sensors, even temperature sensors. It's as if it were designed to store important information and release it only under very specific conditions." Leon approached, observing the numbers and lines dancing on the monitor. Even without completely understanding, he realized that it was something much more complex than he had initially imagined. "And what happens if we discover the right stimulus?" he asked. "Theoretically, the device should release the stored data," replied Camilla, "but I still need to do more tests to understand exactly how it was programmed." At that moment, midnight approached the group. The horse had become accustomed to Camilla's presence with an ease that surprised everyone. Even more impressive was his reaction when she ran a sound frequency analysis program on her laptop. The animal became visibly agitated, moving his head rhythmically and emitting low neighs. "Wait," said Camilla, observing both the horse and the information on the screen. "Midnight is reacting to the sounds that the program is emitting. Look here. The device is responding too." On the screen, a series of indicators began to flash in synchronization with the horse's movements. It was as if there were a deep connection between the animal and the electronic device, a harmony that had been carefully programmed. "This is incredible," sighed Camilla. "Someone trained this horse to be a kind of living key for this device. It's genius and at the same time disturbing." During the following hours, Camilla conducted a series of tests, always with Midnight present. She discovered that the horse responded to specific frequencies that corresponded exactly to the engines of the older tractors that Leon maintained in his workshop. More than that, each engine model seemed to awaken a different reaction in the animal. "Mr. Baker, what years are the tractor models you have here?" asked Camilla, a suspicion growing in her mind. "I have some from the 80s, others from the 90s. "Why?" "Because Midnight reacts differently to each of them. It's as if he had been conditioned to recognize not just sounds, but specific sequences of sounds. Each tractor represents a different password." The revelation left everyone silent. The complexity of the scheme was beginning to become clear. Someone had created a system where a horse served as guardian of important information, reacting only to stimuli that only specific people would know. "But why would someone do this?" asked Tony, scratching his head. "Because it's the last place anyone would look for sensitive information," responded Camilla. "It's brilliant in its simplicity. Who would suspect that an elite horse carries technological secrets? As the afternoon advanced, a new concern arose. If Midnight was really as special as he seemed, his disappearance would not go unnoticed for long. Leon looked at the animal he had saved and wondered if, in trying to help him, he hadn't become involved in something much bigger than he could imagine. "Camilla, do you think you can discover what kind of information is stored in this device?" asked Leon. "I can try, but it will take time, and if I'm right about the importance of all this, maybe it's not safe to continue these tests here." Camilla's concern about safety was not unfounded. The next morning, a middle-aged woman appeared at the gate of Leon's farm, asking to speak with the owner. Irene Silva carried on her face the marks of someone who had seen more than she would have liked, but her eyes still shone with the determination of someone who hadn't given up on the truth. "I heard that you found a big, elegant black horse," she said, without preamble. "May I see him?" Leon hesitated, but something in the woman's posture convinced him that she didn't represent a threat. When he took Irene to where Midnight was peacefully grazing, her reaction was immediate and moving. "My God," she sighed, bringing her hands to her face. "It's really him. It's the Son of Thunder." "Ma'am, do you know this horse?" asked Leon, surprised. Irene approached Midnight, who received her with surprising docility, as if he recognized her. Her experienced hands caressed the animal's neck, while tears ran down her face. "Know him?" "I helped raise him," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I worked at Sullivan's stables for 15 years, until I was let go 6 months ago. Midnight was born there, but he's not the son of just any mare in the current stock." The revelation captured the full attention of Leon and Tony, who moved closer to hear better. His mother was a special mare, called Morning Star. She belonged to Robert's younger brother, Anthony Sullivan, continued Irene, her voice heavy with nostalgia. 25 years ago, the two brothers were partners and best friends. They had big dreams for the stables, wanted to create a unique lineage of horses. Leon felt that he was about to hear a story that would change his understanding of everything that had happened. "What happened between the brothers?" asked Tony. Irene sighed deeply, looking at Midnight as if he could confirm her words. Anthony was a genius with horses, but he was also a frustrated inventor. He had always dreamed of creating technologies that would revolutionize the breeding and training of animals. He spent fortunes on experiments, developing devices that promised to improve communication between man and horse. The mention of technology made Leon and Tony exchange significant glances, remembering the device found in Midnight's saddle. "Robert thought they were fantasies that were too expensive," continued Irene. The two began to argue more and more. Anthony believed he was on the verge of making a revolutionary discovery, something that would completely change the way we understand animal intelligence. Robert saw only unnecessary expenses that were compromising the finances of the stables. "And what happened to Anthony?" asked Leon, already fearing the answer. "He left," said Irene, carefully choosing her words. "One dawn 20 years ago, he simply disappeared. He took only some clothes and a small suitcase. He left everything behind. His part of the stables, his experiments, even Morning Star, who was pregnant with Midnight." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Midnight seemed to sense the tension in the air, approaching Irene as if wanting to console her. "Robert never spoke about his brother again," she continued. "He completely took control of the stables, but he changed. He became cold, obsessive, about control. And when Midnight was born, it became clear that he had inherited not only his mother's beauty, but also an exceptional intelligence that resembled his father's experiments." "Do you think Midnight carries some kind of legacy from Anthony?" asked Leon, thinking about the hidden device. Irene looked directly into his eyes, as if she could see through his soul. "Mr. Baker, in the last few years working at the stables, I witnessed strange things. Robert received night visitors, well-dressed men who didn't come to buy horses. They were always specifically interested in Midnight, asked questions about his reactions to certain stimuli." "What kind of stimuli?" asked Tony. "Specific sounds, old engines, mainly tractors from the 80s and 90s. Robert had some models stored in a special shed, and whenever he turned them on, Midnight would get agitated in a very specific way." The connection with what Camilla had discovered was impossible to ignore. Leon felt that the pieces of a complex puzzle were beginning to fit together. "Ms. Silver, do you believe that Robert hid something in Midnight, something related to his disappeared brother's experiments?" The woman looked at the horse, who observed her with intelligent and sad eyes. "I believe that Midnight is the key to a secret that Robert has kept for 20 years, a secret about what really happened to Anthony, about his discoveries, and about why he really disappeared." At that moment, Camilla arrived at the farm to continue her tests. When she was introduced to Irene and heard her story, she realized that there was much more at stake than she had imagined. "If I'm understanding correctly," said Camilla, "Midnight may carry information left by the very creator of the experiments, information that someone doesn't want to come to light." Irene nodded gravely. "And, for that very reason, you need to be very careful. Robert is not a man who accepts losing what he considers his. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue." Irene's warnings about being careful wouldn't take long to make sense. 2 days after her revealing a visit, strangers began to appear in the vicinity of Leon's farm. First, it was a well-dressed man who introduced himself as a cattle buyer, but who showed interest only in knowing about a black horse that might have gotten lost in the region. "I haven't seen any horse around here," replied Leon diplomatically, but feeling a tightness in his chest as he lied. The next day, it was an elegant woman who said she represented a stable from the neighboring region. Her questions were subtle, but insistent. Was he sure he hadn't found any lost animal? Hadn't he heard of anyone who had found a purebred horse? Tony began to get nervous about so many coincidences. "Mr. Baker, this isn't normal," he commented while they repaired a tractor in the shed. 3 different people in a week, all asking about lost horses, and look how they observe everything around here." Leon had noticed too. The visitors seemed to mentally catalogue every detail of the farm. How many employees worked there? What were the hours of movement? Where the stables were located? It was as if they were making a meticulous reconnaissance of the property. The cool situation became even more worrying when Camilla arrived for another testing session with Midnight and found strange small objects hidden near the barn where the horse usually stayed. "Leon, you need to see this," she called, showing a tiny device she had found attached under a loose board. "They're microphones. Someone is trying to listen to our conversations." The farmer felt a chill down his spine. The situation had escalated, far beyond what he was prepared to handle. It was no longer just about caring for an injured horse. There were powerful people interested in Midnight, and they weren't willing to accept no as an answer. "We need to be more careful," whispered Camilla, looking around with paranoia. "From now on, we only talk about important matters away from the barn and without cell phones nearby." It was in this atmosphere of growing tension that a new concern emerged. Victor Newman, a young cowboy who had been frequenting the farm for a few months helping with occasional services, began to demonstrate strange behavior. He always asked more than he should about Midnight, wanted to know details about where the horse had been found, if Leon intended to return him to his original owner. "This kid has been very curious lately," commented Tony privately with Leon. "And why does he always disappear for hours and come back without explaining where he was?" The suspicion was dramatically confirmed a few days later. Midnight, who had shown himself to be docile with practically everyone he had met, had a violent reaction when Victor approached the stable. The horse reared up, neighed furiously, and categorically refused to let the young man approach. "How strange," murmured Victor, trying to disguise his nervousness. "I've never seen him react like this to me." But Leon and Tony noticed something. Midnight's reaction wasn't one of fear or surprise. It was one of recognition and rejection, as if the horse knew exactly who Victor was and didn't like his presence at all. That same night, Tony decided to discreetly follow the young cowboy when he left the farm. What he discovered confirmed his worst suspicions. Victor met with 2 well-dressed men in a dark car on the road that gave access to the property. The conversation was brief, but clearly Victor was passing on information about what was happening at the farm. The next morning, Leon directly confronted the young man. Victor, I need you to be honest with me. Who are these people you've been meeting with? The young man tried to deny it initially, but when he realized he had been discovered, he broke down. Tears of shame and fear ran down his young face as he confessed. "Mr. Baker, I didn't want to do this," he sobbed. "But they offered me a lot of money, more than I would see in years working here. They said they just wanted to know if you had found a specific horse, nothing more." "And you didn't ask why this was so important?" questioned Leon, more sad than angry. "I did ask, but they said it was just a commercial matter, that the horse was worth a lot of money and the owner was desperate to recover him," explained Victor. "I swear I didn't know it could cause problems for you." Tony, who had heard the entire confession, shook his head with disappointment. "And what have you told them so far?" "I told them about the black horse, that he was injured when you found him, that he's been reacting strangely to some sounds, and that a lady comes here to do tests with electronic equipment." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Leon realized that there was no longer any way to keep Midnight hidden for much longer. The people who were looking for him knew exactly where he was, and they also knew about the discoveries that Camilla was making. "Victor, you're going to have to choose a side," said Leon firmly. "Either you're with us or you're with them. There's no sitting on the fence when there's so much at stake." The young man looked at Midnight, who observed him with intelligent and suspicious eyes. For the first time, Victor seemed to understand that he had gotten involved in something much bigger and more complex than he had initially imagined. I want to be on the right side," he finally said, "but I'm afraid of what they might do if they discover I've changed sides." Victor's confession marked a turning point in the situation. Leon realized that he needed outside help, someone with resources and knowledge to deal with adversaries who clearly had much more power and influence than he did. It was Irene who suggested an unexpected solution. "I know a journalist," she said during a secret meeting away from the farm. "Peter Monroe from the Regional Journal. He's a man of integrity and has experience with complicated investigations. If anyone can help us understand what's really happening, it's him." Peter Monroe was a man in his 40s with graying hair and penetrating eyes that reflected decades of experience, investigating stories that others preferred to keep buried. When Irene approached him with Midnight's story, his journalistic curiosity was immediately awakened. "Let me understand," said Peter, carefully noting in his notebook. "An elite horse escapes during a storm, carries a sophisticated electronic device, and his owner is mobilizing considerable resources to recover him. And all of this is connected to the disappearance of a man 20 years ago?" "Exactly," confirmed Camilla, "and the data I've been able to partially extract from the device suggests that Anthony Sullivan left much more than experiments with horses. There are references to revolutionary scientific discoveries." Peter leaned back in his chair, processing the information. His experience told him that there was an important story there, but also that everyone involved was running real risks. "Do you have any idea what these discoveries might be?" he asked. Camilla connected her laptop and showed the partial data she had been able to decode. "Anthony was developing an advanced form of communication between humans and animals," she explained. "Not just traditional training, but a technological interface that would allow a much deeper mutual understanding. The files mention neural synchronization protocols and bioelectronic response patterns." "In other words," added Peter, "he was decades ahead of his time. This kind of technology today would be worth millions and would revolutionize not just animal breeding, but potentially veterinary medicine, behavioral research." "And the military question," added Irene, surprising everyone. "In the last years, at the stables, I heard conversations about applications of animal training for security and defense." The silence that followed was loaded with implications. Everyone began to understand why Robert was so desperate to recover Midnight, and why such well-connected people were involved in the search. "We need to move Midnight to a safe place," declared Peter, "and we need to do it tonight." That's when Zelda entered the story. A 70-year-old woman, owner of a small sanctuary for rescued animals in the more distant rural area of the town, she had been a close friend of Leon's late wife. When Peter approached her explaining the situation, she didn't hesitate to offer help. "Bring the boy here," she said simply. "Here he will be safe, and I know how to deal with people who ask too many questions." The transfer operation was carefully planned. Victor, demonstrating his change of sides, offered valuable information about the surveillance schedules he had observed. Peter coordinated a route that avoided the main roads, while Camilla prepared portable equipment to continue the studies of the device in a safe location. During the night move, Midnight demonstrated once again his exceptional intelligence. As if understanding the importance of the moment, he remained calm and cooperative throughout the journey. When they arrived at Zelda's sanctuary, the horse seemed to immediately recognize that he was in a safe and welcoming environment. "He has good instincts," commented Zelda, observing how Midnight quickly adapted to the new environment. Intelligent animals always recognize people with good hearts. With Midnight safely secured, the group could focus on completely decoding the device. Working in a shed improvised as a laboratory, Camilla made impressive discoveries in the following days. "Peter, you need to see this," she called one morning, pointing to her laptop. "I've managed to access a series of Anthony's personal files. They're not just scientific experiments, they're letters, diaries, recorded messages." Peter approached, reading carefully the texts that appeared on the screen. "Robert doesn't understand the revolutionary potential of what we've discovered," he read aloud. "He sees only costs, but this can fundamentally change our relationship with the animal world. I'm documenting everything in Morningstar, and when her foal is born, he will carry the legacy of our work." "So Midnight doesn't just carry technical data," murmured Leon. "He carries the complete story of what happened between the brothers." Camilla continued navigating through the files, finding increasingly revealing messages. "Look at this one. Robert threatened to destroy all my work if I didn't stop the experiments. He said it's compromising our reputation, but how can I stop when I'm so close to a discovery that can transform the world? If something happens to me, at least Midnight will keep the truth." The last entry in the diary was dated just 2 days before Anthony's disappearance. "I've made a decision. I'm going to leave before it's too late. Robert won't let me continue, and there are forces interested in my work that don't have good intentions. I'm leaving everything documented in Midnight. One day, when he's ready, the truth will come to light." Peter closed the notebook where he was noting everything, finally understanding the full dimension of the story. "Anthony didn't disappear because of family quarrels," he said. "He fled because he discovered something so important that powerful people wanted to control his discoveries." The discovery of Anthony's diaries completely transformed the group's understanding of the events. Peter spent the following days verifying facts, confirming dates, and building a clear picture of what had really happened 20 years ago. His investigations revealed surprising details about Anthony Sullivan's disappearance. "I found travel to records," announced Peter during a meeting at Zelda's sanctuary. "Anthony didn't simply disappear, he emigrated to Canada 2 days after leaving the stables. There he founded a biotechnology company specializing in animal communication." Camilla looked up from the laptop, where she continued decoding Midnight's files. "That explains a lot," she said. "The protocols I found in the device are much more advanced than anything available 20 years ago." Anthony continued developing his research abroad. "And there's more," continued Peter, consulting his notes. "His company, called BioLink Technologies, registered 17 international patents related to the human-animal interface. Some of these technologies are being used today in military training programs and animal-assisted therapies." Irene, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "So Anthony managed to achieve his dreams," she murmured with tears in her eyes. "He didn't give up on his discoveries." "Not only that," added Peter, "he became one of the world pioneers in the field, and apparently he never forgot what he left behind." Camilla made a discovery that changed everything. In the most recent files on the device, she found messages dated just 6 months earlier. "Folks, you need to hear this," she said, activating an audio file. Anthony's voice, more mature but still recognizable, echoed through the shed. If anyone is listening to this message, it means that Midnight has finally found the right people. For 20 years, I've maintained secret contact with some employees of the stables, waiting for the right moment to rescue the work I left unfinished. Midnight is not just a carrier of old data. He carries the keys to revolutionize our understanding of animal intelligence. The revelation left everyone silent. Peter was the first to react. Anthony has been planning this for years. He wanted Midnight to be found by people who would continue his work, not by those who would exploit it. "But why now?" asked Leon. "Why after so much time?" The answer came in another audio file, this one even more recent. "I've learned that Robert is negotiating the sale of the stables to an international consortium. If this happens, Midnight will be sold along with it, probably for purposes that contradict everything I believe in. It's time to act." Camilla then discovered Anthony's complete plan in the final files of the device. He had programmed a specific sequence of events that would lead to Midnight's liberation during a storm, using a remote control system for the stable latches activated by specific weather conditions. "He engineered the escape," whispered Tony, impressed. "Everything was planned for Midnight to reach people who would treat him well." Peter discovered an even more surprising detail. Anthony had been discreetly monitoring the region, and Leon had not been chosen by chance. "Your name appears in reports that Anthony kept about people of integrity in the region," revealed Peter. "Your reputation as an honest man and your ability with animals made you an ideal candidate to care for Midnight." At that moment, Zelda called everyone's attention to Midnight, who was demonstrating unusual behavior. The horse approached Camilla and began to make rhythmic movements with his head, exactly as he did when the old engines were turned on. "He's trying to tell us something," observed Camilla, quickly turning on her equipment. "The device is reacting in a different way, en humor." The computer screen, a new sequence of files began to unlock. They were Anthony's final instructions, his ultimate message for whoever found Midnight. "If you've gotten this far, it means you've trusted Midnight as much as he trusted you. Now I can give you the final gift, the location of my original laboratories, hidden in the stables themselves, and the keys to access 20 years of advanced research that can benefit all of humanity." Peter felt that he was witnessing the climax of an extraordinary story. Anthony didn't just hide data in Midnight, he said. He created a scientific treasure that can transform our relationship with animals and solve problems we haven't even imagined. But the discovery also brought a new responsibility. In the final files, Anthony had left a choice for whoever found Midnight: reveal everything publicly, allowing his discoveries to benefit humanity, or keep everything secret to protect the horse and the people involved. "The decision is ours," said Leon, looking at each member of the group. "But whatever our choice, it will change all our lives." Midnight, as if understanding the importance of the moment, approached Leon and gently rested his head on his shoulder. It was a gesture of absolute trust, a confirmation that the farmer had been chosen not just by chance, but by something much greater. "I think I already know what our decision should be," said Leon, stroking the horse's neck. "But first, we need to prepare for what lies ahead. Robert won't easily give up when he discovers that he's lost not only Midnight, but also control over his brother's legacy." The group's decision was made the following morning, but not without a surprise that none of them expected. When they arrived at Zelda's sanctuary, they found an elderly, white-haired man waiting by the gate. Midnight, upon seeing him, neighed emotionally and ran toward him like a child who reunites with his father after years of separation. "Anthony," whispered Irene, barely able to believe what she was seeing. The man smiled, tears running down his face, wrinkled by time and distance. "Hello, my dear friends," said Anthony Sullivan, his voice heavy with emotion. "I think it's time for me to personally explain this whole story." Peter was the first to recover from the shock. "Mr. Sullivan, how did you get here? How did you know where we were?" Anthony caressed Midnight, who couldn't stop demonstrating his joy at reuniting with the man he considered his true owner. "I've been monitoring the situation since Midnight escaped," he explained. I installed discrete tracking systems that allowed me to follow his movements without interfering. When I realized that you had deciphered my messages and made the decision to protect him, I knew it was safe to appear. Camilla, still processing the revelation, asked, "But why didn't you come before? Why did you let us go through all this tension?" "Because I needed to be sure that you were the right people," replied Anthony. "Anyone can feign kindness out of self-interest, but you demonstrated genuine love for Midnight, even without knowing his importance. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." Leon, still trying to absorb the situation, asked the question everyone wanted to ask. "And now? What happens with Midnight, with all these discoveries?" Anthony smiled, observing the group of people who had become an unlikely family united by the destiny of a special horse. "Now you have a choice to make. I can take Midnight with me to Canada, where he'll be safe and my research will continue in secrecy. Or we can work together to create something revolutionary right here in America." The proposal surprised everyone. Peter was the first to understand the implications. "Are you talking about establishing a research center here?" "Exactly," confirmed Anthony. "With the resources I've accumulated over these years and the genuine passion you've demonstrated, we can create an institute dedicated to the ethical study of communication between humans and animals. A place where Midnight won't just be an object of study, but an active collaborator in discoveries that can transform the world." Zelda, who had observed everything in silence, finally spoke. "And my sanctuary? Could it be part of this?" "It would be the perfect base," replied Anthony enthusiastically. "A place where rescued animals would participate in research that could improve the lives of millions of other animals." Camilla immediately realized the possibilities. With advanced technology and genuine love for animals, we could develop revolutionary treatments, more humane training methods, even ways to help traumatized animals recover. And I could document everything, added Peter. Show the world that it's possible to do advanced science while completely respecting animal welfare. Leon looked at Midnight, who observed him with intelligent and confident eyes. "And Robert, he won't simply accept losing Midnight and discovering that his brother is alive." Anthony sighed, a shadow passing over his face. "Robert, that's the hardest part of this whole story. Do you believe that he knew I was alive all these years?" The question caught everyone by surprise. Peter furrowed his brows. "You mean—" "Robert always knew where I was," revealed Anthony. "We maintained sporadic contact over the years. He's not the villain of this story. In fact, it was he who suggested that I program Midnight's escape when he learned of the imminent sale of the stables." The silence that followed was deafening. Irene was the first to find words. "But then, why all this pursuit? Why the men prowling around the farm?" "Because Robert was trying to protect you," explained Anthony. "The ones truly interested in Midnight are representatives of the international consortium that wants to buy the stables. They know the value of my research and wanted the horse for their own purposes. Robert hired security to monitor the situation and ensure that you were safe." The revelation completely transformed everyone's understanding of the events of the last few days. "Then Victor," began Tony, "was working for Robert, yes, but to protect, not to harm," confirmed Anthony. "My brother wanted to know if Midnight was well cared for before revealing the truth." At that moment, a car approached the sanctuary. Robert Sullivan got out of the vehicle, his posture showing a vulnerability that no one had seen before. When the brothers reunited after 20 years, there were no words, just a long and emotional embrace that spoke more than any explanation could. "I'm sorry for letting you go," whispered Robert. "I was young, stubborn, and didn't understand the magnitude of what you were discovering." "And I should have trusted you more," replied Anthony. "I should have explained my intentions better instead of simply running away." Peter, observing the brothers' reunion and finally understanding the full dimension of the story, knew that he had witnessed something special. Not just a story about a horse and advanced technology, but about family, forgiveness, second chances, and the transformative power of genuine love for animals. 6 months later, the Midnight Institute for Animal Communication was in full operation. Located between the old Sullivan stables and Zelda's expanded sanctuary, it became a world model for ethical and revolutionary research. Midnight, now recognized as the first animal collaborator in the history of science, continued to surprise researchers from around the world with his intelligence and communication ability. Leon, appointed director of animal welfare at the Institute, had finally found a purpose that honored both his passion for animals and the memory of his late wife. And when he looked at Midnight running freely through the green fields, he knew that some storms don't come to destroy, but to bring exactly what we need most. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from.